Chris from CK Cycles here. I got some sun in my face, but I'm not going to complain. I'm glad to see the sun. A few weeks ago, I posted a video, real short one, about the carb that came on the bike and the condition of this carb, and particularly the carb body. It has just been rotted away. I mean, if you look inside, I guess that's kind of the air box, the intake side of the carb, it is just, I mean, chunks of it are gone, and the small ports and inlets here on this side of the carb, I don't know if those are you know, the idle passages or whatnot, but those are just mutilated. So this carb was unsalvageable. So I posted a question, said, what should I do? Should I get a stock replacement carb? Should I go with you know, an aftermarket carb that would require me to switch over to a pod filter? I really wanted to keep the stock air box on the bike. Should I go with a pumper carb? Things of that nature. And I got some good responses, and I decided that I was going to search for a stock replacement carb. This Carburator is marked right here. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if I'll be able to get it to you. But it is marked 1T as in Tom 260. This came off of my 77. I was told in one of my comments I need to keep my eye out. If I wanted to go stock, I should keep my eye out for a 1T2 or a 1T1, which I believe was on the 76 bikes. And I was able to find this carb online, actually on eBay, and this is, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, a 1T160 carb. So I believe that this carb came off in 1976 XT500. And I think the main difference between the two carbs is that this on the intake manifold side is, I think it's considered 34 millimeter, whereas this 77 carb on the intake manifold side here is considered a 32 millimeter. So I'm not sure why Yamaha changed up the size of the carb, if that was a Makuni thing. I know eventually this carb later on down the road would turn into a carb that had a pumper mechanism on it and all that sort of stuff. I really wanted to stick to kind of the simplest stock carburetor I could find, and this is what I could find, and it was well within my price range. It came from Canada, and so I'm excited to see what it looks like. Now the internals of my carb look really good. And I even removed, you know, the jets. Those popped right out, no problem. Sometimes getting these jets out is a real bad issue. And even the float looks good. The float posts are intact. The float rod moves easily. So, I mean, the internals of this carb are great. It's just the body. The choke mechanism is stiff, but I mean, all the return springs, you know, this kind of hardware stuff is good as well. So I'm kind of excited because I actually have some parts I could probably steal from this carb if needed. But to be honest with you, this carb, I feel like I could probably just bolt this carb up, you know, and the bike would probably run. I might have some leaks, because I'm sure gaskets are probably shot, and maybe O-rings, maybe in the choke mechanism, if there's an O-ring in there, or even the O-ring in the air screw or something are cracked. You know, there might be some small issues to deal with, but this carb is looking incredible. I am very excited. And just like the airbox, that floored me. this one I was able to find at a very reasonable price. I'm going to have to rebuild it. I don't mind that at all, but oh, look at that. All right, so float posts are intact. The float post is moving freely. Man, look at that. Come right out. Main jet coming right out. Make sure I get my eye on this one. This is the one that can be, is that the idle jet? That's the one. Oh, that's coming right out. Yep. Look at that. Oops, we don't want to lose it. Idle jet came right out. Let's see if we can get the float off of there. Boy, that post, that float post is just kind of falling out. Sometimes those things can be stuck in there, and then you risk breaking a float post, and then that carb body is junk. I tried to take it out the wrong way. Here it goes. Oh, yeah, it slipped right out. That looks good and clean. Float looks good. Float valve looks pretty clean. I'll probably get a new one of those in the carb kit anyways. All right, let's take a look at the slide. You know, this carb, the top of it, I don't know, does that remind anybody of anything? I was talking to a buddy of mine, shipping photographs back and forth about these carburetors, and he said, that looks like the same series carb that's on a KZ. You know, if you look at, I don't know, a KZ900 or a KZ1000, they kind of have a very similar top hat look to them. So who knows, maybe Kawasaki put this series of carbs on their KZ bikes as well. That'd be interesting to find out. That looks good. Oh man, look at this. So slide mechanism is free, choke is free, and look at inside the slide mechanism. I think that in order to get the slide out and to probably do a needle replacement or a needle adjustment, you need to, I don't know if you can see it there, you need to push down this locking tab here. And there's a locking tab on this one as well. And I tell you what, those locking tabs look completely unmolested. Usually you can tell when these locking tabs have been bent down and then bent back. And these both look like they have not been touched. The end of the needle there, it looks real good. I'll compare it to the needle in the carb kit, but I may leave the needle alone. If it hasn't been touched or messed with. Okay, so I got the carb apart as far as I am going to take it. I did have to, I will have to use the lock washer and the nut off of my stock carb for this throttle mechanism retaining. And over here on this side is just supposed to be like a plug screw right there. And this carb had this kind of funky thing screwed in there. I don't think there's any adjustment that goes there. I think it's just a hole. I don't know what for, maybe for a feature on a different bike, but that was kind of screwed in there and it wasn't right. So I did remove that screw off of my my carb, and I have this nut and that screw soaking in some evapor rust because they were a little rusty. And so I'll leave those in overnight or something like that before I install them on this carb. So essentially what I'm going to do is just spray this carb down with some Simple Green and scrub it up as best that I can and get it nice and clean. And then I will spray it off and spray all the channels out with carb cleaner. And then I'll install the new carb kit and get this ready to be put on the bike. So here I am beginning to rebuild the carburetor. I ended up taking it apart further than I had planned. As you can see, the throttle, kind of the throttle linkage where the throttle cables come in to the carburetor has been taken off. The throttle cables mount has been taken off, along with the choke lever and things like that. So I really wanted to polish this carb up and make it look nice. So I took kind of all those accessories off of the carburetor, hit them with a brass wire wheel, and really kind of cleaned the carb up and tried to make it look nice. I thought I would accelerate this video because there's really only a couple things I wanted to touch on. But otherwise, this carb took me, I don't know, probably around an hour to fully rebuild. Just kind of taking my time and watching what I was doing. But there's a couple things I want to point out throughout this rebuild process. Things are going back together smoothly. Carb is looking really clean. Everything's operating smoothly. Getting the spring catch set in place. Choke tube installed. Now it's time for the choke actuating lever. So there's a very small ball and a small spring, and that works to lock the choke in, you know, when you have it at full choke and whatnot. And actually, when I took it apart, those two things went flying. So I ended up having to use the spring and the small kind of ball bearing in there off of my original carb. So I was thankful I had that original carb to have some of those spare parts when I have those kind of moments where I lose something. Yeah, here I am. I'm looking under my desk. I think I lost a screw. Well, that happens. All right, so there is the float seat. That's going to be all new for the float. So yeah, I wanted to point out right here is that since I had the carb that came on the bike, the carb that I purchased, and also a carb kit, I ended up with 3 sets of jets. And I'll have to look real quick here. Let me get to where I need to be. Okay, motorcycle. So what I ended up doing is I ended up going with the jets that I believe were applicable to this carb from 1976. And I'll tell you what those sizes were that I installed. Okay, so number 4, let's see here. So I believe I put in a number 200 main jet. No, I'm sorry. I think I put in a 220 main jet. and I want to say a number 35 Pilot Jet. So I did 220 and a number 35. Now I believe that I still have a number 240 main jet. I think a 240 main jet was in the Carburator that came on the bike. So, you know, the nice thing is I'll be able to start the bike up, get it running, see how it runs, and if I want to change out the 220 I put in and throw the 240 in, I'll be able to do that. So I have that capability. Gaskets on this carb that came from eBay were all original. They were hard and rigid, so I don't think this carb has been messed with too much. So I'm just here installing it on the bike. It took a little bit of extra time to get it on the bike. I think eventually I have found it was easiest to install the intake manifold on the bike first and then the carb on the bike. And I think that was just for clearance reasons, because I had a hard time getting the screws by the intake manifold. So I ended up having to do the intake manifold first and then the carburetor. I don't know if I show it here in this video, but that's what I ended up having to do. But as you can see, the bike is coming together. Front wheel is on, triple tree is on, rear wheel is on, brake is all hooked up. You know, the bike is really starting to come together. Yeah, here I am still trying to get it on with the intake manifold on the carb, but in the end I had to do the manifold first and then I think pop the carb on. Okay, so anyways, this ended up being, you know, almost a 20-minute video, but this represents probably 2.5 hours worth of work to get this car rebuilt and then to get it fully mounted on the bike. But I think in the end it'll be fully worth it. I'm excited to have a stock carb on the bike, kind of a basic simple carb, and I'm thinking it'll probably run the bike perfectly fine. This bike's going to have plenty of power on its own. You know, upgrading to a racing car would be cool, you know, and increase in performance. Maybe someday I'll do that, but you know, for now I think I'm going to be pretty happy with what this is going to provide for me. So, all right, well, have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you in the next video.